Hi guys, today's lecture focuses on motivation. We're going to talk about some competing theories for how we explain motivated behaviors. And then we're going to look at a very particular type of motivation, which is that of sexual motivation. So before we begin talking about the different theories behind motivated behaviors, we should understand what motivation is at its basic definition. So motivation is some sort of need that energizes a behavior. So a motivation leads to a motivated behavior, and that motivated behavior is motivated by the achievement of some sort of goal. So motivations can be as simple as motivated to perform well on a test for that external goal of getting a positive grade, but there can also be survival-based motivations. So for example, if you look at this young man over here, Alan Ralston was basically pinned between a rock and a hard place, quite literally, and his goal was survival, and he had a need to get free of the branch, and so that goal of surviving was set in peril by this fact that he was pinned to this rock, because if he's pinned to a rock, he's not able to get food or water to survive. So the motivated behavior is to free himself by cutting off his arm. It's an extreme behavior, but when your decision is stay pinned and die, or cut off the arm and live without an arm but survive, then the motivated behavior can be understood. So we're going to talk about some competing theories behind motivation, and I'd like for you to keep in mind Alan and see if that can help to explain his motivated behavior. So the first perspective that we're going to talk about is instinct theory, and this is the first one to really develop, and it looks at genetic predisposition for certain behaviors. The next one is drive reduction theory, which basically says your body has some sort of a need and you operate to reduce that need. Arousal theory says that we seek out arousal and we enjoy things that we view as stimulating or arousing, and so we seek them out actively. The fourth one looks at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so it looks at how different types of behaviors are motivated and how they are enabled. So to start off with instinctually based motivated behaviors, we generally think about lesser species, if you want to call them lesser species. What I'm talking about here are things that are not large primates, and many of the more intelligent species out there like dolphins or other aquatic creatures. So we do certainly, humans and other species that are of the higher level of intellect do have motivated behaviors that are motivated instinctually. However, they are mixed with many other behaviors that are not necessarily instinctual in nature. However, if you look at a bird, they're going to be building the same type of nest no matter where you put them. Humans, on the other hand, we can build with thatch, we can build with wood, we can build with stone, mud. We basically take creative thinking and add that to the equation of the desire for a home. Whereas instinctually based behaviors are hardwired in the DNA. So if you think about Alan, it cannot explain his behavior because there's no hardwired genetic code for cutting off your arm with a tool, because tools aren't encoded in our DNA. So that's something that cannot be explained by instinctual psychology. So the next level up, and they sort of took instincts and looked at it from a greater level up. And they basically created a theory that encapsulates the idea of instincts, but also adds other motivated behaviors that operate in the same fashion, but are not necessarily hardwired into our DNA. So this is the drive reduction theory. So basically, the drive reduction theory states that we have some sort of physiological need. And it creates a situation of discomfort for your body. It's an aroused tension state called a drive. And they're almost always unpleasant in some way, shape, or form because they motivate you to achieve some sort of goal that will reduce that drive and induce some level of pleasure out of reducing that drive. So, a basic example would be, you have a need for water. Everybody drinks water in some form every single day. If they don't, they will die. So we all have a need for water. And when you become thirsty, like I am now, I wish I had a glass of water in front of me, then you have that drive. That drive is known as thirst. And then you engage in some sort of drive-reducing behavior that reduces that drive, reduces that negative experience of thirst or hunger or whatever it is, and it makes you feel better overall. So that's the drive reduction theory. So let's look at it with a visual example. I mentioned a couple of lectures ago that our body really likes what's known as homeostasis. Our body really likes the idea of a steady internal state that doesn't fluctuate very much. And when it does fluctuate, it wants to bring it back in. This is because it's better for your body to have a predictable environment, particularly a predictable internal environment, because to do so means that they can better allocate resources and reduce the need for taking in additional calories. So it's the whole idea of conserving. And your body wants to maintain its resources for as long as possible so that if it needs to mobilize resources in a life or death situation, it can do so. So homeostasis is really the driving factor behind this drive reduction theory, which says that our body wants to reduce any negative feeling of discomfort because it runs counter to homeostasis. So let's look at this visual example. You have an empty stomach, you desire food, and food goes into the stomach, fills the stomach, and as a result you feel that sensation of drive reduction. So you no longer have the hunger drive. That sensation of being full is pleasing, and so you enjoy that experience, and you have succeeded in that form of motivated behavior. So can drive reduction explain Alan's experience earlier? Well, where the original theory, right, where we were looking at instincts, could not explain the behavior, the drive reduction theory actually can explain the behavior, because the drive reduction theory basically says that Alan was, at that point, becoming motivated by the drives of hunger, thirst, and the drive to survive. So all of these compounded together to motivate a behavior to make it possible for him to regain that homeostasis by seeking out food, water, and medical care. So the drive to survive led to the motivated behavior cutting off his arm, and therefore this theory is capable of explaining Alan's behavior. Another theory of motivation looks at arousal. It basically posits that humans and other primates and other intelligent species are motivated by novelty. The idea being that we enjoy things that are mentally stimulating and things that are arousing in some form. Basically, we like to feel good, and we are motivated to feel good. Now, optimum arousal is not necessarily going to be exclusive to species like humans or greater primates. It's not restricted to those species. However, we do see it in higher levels of these species because we have a higher capacity for cognitive thought and planning, which means that we're better able to seek out these positive arousal experiences. So an example might be giving children toys or learning tools, giving monkeys the same thing, and although there is no need, there is no need to learn, but many people enjoy learning. And so there's a motivation that's internal. There's no external reward here, at least none that's readily visible. Now, if you see these young children right here, they're learning about the body. Well, one or both of those children may one day become a doctor, in which case that information will be quite beneficial. That really lends itself more to the idea of latent learning that we discussed earlier, which basically says that people learn things with the thought that they may become beneficial in the future. But many people also do things simply because they enjoy them. And so optimum arousal is the only theory that can generally explain those behaviors. Well, not the only. The next one can explain some of those behaviors too. So, can optimum arousal explain Alan's experience? Not really, because Alan wasn't motivated by pleasure or arousal. He was motivated by fear of survival. So, different behaviors can be explained by the different theories. The fourth theory looks at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow basically said that certain needs need to be met before other needs can be met. For instance, you're not going to write, the most incredible screenplay if you are dying of hunger or thirst. So basically what Maslow did was he ordered the different types of needs that we have and explained that if you don't achieve the lower levels first, then it's going to become more difficult, if not impossible, to achieve some of the higher levels. So let's look at these. At the very bottom is the physiological need. So these are our basic needs. These are the first things we have to take care of, which basically says that we have to have sufficient food and water to survive. Most people, particularly in the developed world, have no problem with basic physiological needs. Sure, we have our homeless and our poor. However, they generally do have access to the most basic form of hunger and thirst survival needs. As such, they are able to concern themselves with the next level, which is that of safety. So the need to feel that the world is organized, predictable, safe, and secure. So this is where things like shelter come into play. So first you make sure that you have your food to survive, and then you build a shelter. The next thing is getting some sort of feeling of belongingness and love. So the need to love and be loved is a very important need because it lends itself to avoiding loneliness and alienation, which, as we learned in past lectures, can be very stressful and can lead you to have some negative health consequences as well. So belongingness and love needs are very important. The next level up is the need for self-esteem. And this is, we're starting to get to the areas now where fewer and fewer people are achieving these needs. So the self-esteem need is basically the need to feel competent, independent, and to be respected. The top level is achieved by very few, and that's self-actualization, which is the need to live up to one's fullest potential. Very few people make it all the way up here from Maslow's perspective. These are people that make it to the top of their game, and in a way that leaves them humble and happy. So if you think about a good example of looking at this, and how many of the people in different parts of the world may have different struggles, a good way to look at this is from the movie Castaway. So if you're not familiar, Tom Hanks gets stranded on an island, and he's the only one there. And so it's very trying for him. And so it starts with a physiological need. He needs to find food and water, and he does this. And so he manages to maintain his safety by building shelter and preparing fire and protecting himself. And then the only level that he really meets beyond that is the belongingness and love needs. And he does this through Wilson, which Wilson is a volleyball that he has painted a face on. And so this is something that helps him to generate and provide love and to also feel love coming back towards him. So many people don't make it beyond that need for love and to be loved. They don't make it up to that esteem or self-actualization needs. More people make it to esteem than to self-actualization, obviously. But the idea here is that different needs are motivated by different factors, and that if the most basic needs are not met, then the next level needs can't be met. Now, this is not always entirely true. In fact, I mean, to say that people that don't have any feeling of safety at all are incapable of friendships and developing feelings of love and attachment is ludicrous on its face. So you can jump, but certain needs are still always going to be perceived as more important than other needs. So we've talked now about basic motivation and how you can really use the different types of motivation to examine different behaviors. And we looked at Alan as sort of explaining how we can examine all the different theories. And so with that last one, does Maslow explain it? Yes, I believe he does, because you take care of that first most basic level of taking care of your need for hunger and thirst by escaping that dangerous situation. So now we're going to look at a unique type of motivation, which is sexual motivation and the need to belong. And these two motivations are very tightly linked, in large part because sexual motivation provides an outlet for the need to belong. So let's examine this type of motivation and all of the different components of sexuality in a little bit more depth. So, why do we want to bang? That's the pertinent question, right? That's the question that everybody's asking. Why is it that we are so interested in getting laid? Well, it's Mother Nature's clever way of making this happen. Your body may not be in line with your mind. Your mind might say, hey, you know what, child-free and happy. But your body says, fuck that, man, I want to pop out some babies. And that's part of why sexual motivation is so powerful, because it's a drive to include yourself in the genetic pool for the upcoming population. So if you've ever read Cat's Cradle, I actually just finished it for like the 90th time. I don't know. I've read it plenty. And one of my favorite parts is when if you're not familiar with the book, I hope I don't spoil it for you. If you know this part, you'll still enjoy it reading it. So the world's ended, basically, and there are only a few people left, and only one female, and she's past the age of bearing children. And so two of the characters are talking, about how long it had been since they'd had any sexual desire whatsoever, and they realized that part of the reason why, they were like, well, maybe things would be different if we had a woman of childbearing age. And so the reality is that a lot of the desire to have sex is deeply rooted in the genetic desire to procreate. So that's the most basic core of sexual motivation. And sexual motivation resolves itself through the sexual response cycle, which is a 4-phase model of how sexual experiences occur. So we begin with excitement. And excitement does not always lead through to the whole phase. This is the first level. And this is basically when the genitals become engorged with blood. The vagina prepares itself for penetration by actually elongating and lubricating itself. And then the penis becomes larger as blood flows into it. So the excitement phase is basically the getting a boner phase, right? The plateau phase is what follows. So this is your foreplay. This is your actual sex. This is the point when the excitement is peaking and everything's increasing. So your breathing rate is increasing, your pulse is increasing, your blood pressure has risen. You may start to develop a dry throat from breathing so heavily. So the plateau leads up to the final stage of the actual sexual activity, which is the orgasm. So the orgasm is this, it's this impossible to control contraction all over your body that basically increases your rate of breathing and your blood pressure. So this is the moment of sexual release. In men, this results in ejaculation. In women, this results in tight contractions within the vagina. So the orgasm is the final phase of the actual sexual activity. At this point, you move into the resolution phase, which is when the genitals begin to shrink back. So they release their blood back into the body, and the men go through what's known as the refractory period or the refractory phase. Women, on the other hand, resolve in a slower fashion. As a result of this, they can actually become aroused much more quickly. They can go back into sexual activity because they're not going through the same type of refractory period as men. So for men, after orgasm, this refractory period prevents them from achieving another orgasm quickly after the first one. So typically, men's refractory period varies from man to man. Some men can go instantly after, but many men can take, half an hour or longer before they are ready or interested in having sex again. So that's the 4 phases of the sexual response cycle. I think that in some regard, most people are already familiar with this experience, even if they've never had sex, because they've experienced masturbation. So now you know all of the different phases of when you're touching yourself. It's all the same, right? Excitement is when you see that hot picture on Gone Wild, right? And then you start touching yourself during the plateau. You jizz all over yourself in the orgasm phase. And then you close all those tabs on your computer, ashamed at what the hell you were looking at, because you're in the refractory period and you're no longer interested in sex. So next time you masturbate, just think about the physics behind it. It can become entertaining. So what's going to start that excitement period? Well, there are 2 things that work together to generate the arousal. The external stimuli, and then there are some internal stimuli as well. So external stimuli is basically anything that comes in through your sensation organs. So here I'm talking about, it could be a touch, right? It could be just the fabric rubbing your penis. Can lead to some level of sexual arousal. Or it can be a sound, a smell or a taste, or something that you see visually. So all 5 senses can really contribute to some sort of sexual arousal when exposed to sexually erotic material. So a perfect example is pornography. That provides you with visual stimulation, that provides you with audio, and you combine those together and you result in arousal. Women tend to experience arousal as well, even though it's primarily believed that men are the ones that watch porno. Many women enjoy it as well. However, women tend to rely more on the internal factor, which is the imagined stimuli, which basically is the portions that are involved with the desire to engage with someone at a more intimate level. So, not that men don't require this. It's just that men tend to be easier to arouse physically, whereas women tend to require more of the internal component. However, both men and women rely on both of those components to engage in sexual activity. And in fact, there's the requirement of physiological readiness. So, if you have the external stimuli, the imagined stimuli, but no physiological readiness, then you will be less motivated to engage in sexual behavior. And the motivated behavior of the act of sex will not occur. So a perfect example of the lack of physiological readiness would be men that have problems achieving erection, and women that have problems like, vaginismus or, vulvodynia, disorders of the vagina that enable or that preclude them from producing lubrication or making sex uncomfortable. So you need all 3 components for a positive sexual experience. So one of the ways that these can actually be combined is in our dreams. So you can have, the physiological readiness because your mind no longer plays as much of a level, because your psyche isn't preventing you from achieving an erection or anything like that, which does happen for some men. So dreams give a form of sexual arousal, and almost all men and a large percentage of women that have sexual dreams, and almost all of us, in fact, probably once you've had sex, you're guaranteed to have a sexual dream, and probably before that point as well. But a majority of people, almost all men, and a large portion of women, actually achieve orgasm as a result of their dreams. So, pleasant way to wake up in the morning, not as pleasant when you're cleaning it up, but most people have experienced it. Now, we're motivated by what we are attracted to. And what we are attracted to is what's known as our sexual orientation. Now, you can't really change what you're attracted to. Most people are in the middle right here. Most people are heterosexual. By that I mean that They are attracted to members of the opposite sex, right? Hetero means opposite. So that's a man that loves a woman that loves a man. Pretty basic, that's most of us. On the other hand, we have two forms of atypical sexual expression. We have homosexual, which homo means the same. So that means that's a man that's attracted to a man or a woman that's attracted to a woman. And then similar to that is bisexuality. Now, bisexuality means bi means both. So that means that men are attracted to both women and men. And that women can be attracted to both men and women as well. So what does it break down to? Well, unfortunately for bisexuality, there are not really very many good numbers out there. It's something that has it's been struggled to be accepted. Many people, are still claiming that people that are bisexual are simply confused. There's no reason, there's no scientific evidence to support that it's just that they're confused. In fact, there's more scientific evidence to suggest that sexuality is on a bit of a continuum. And so you can be bisexual without being confused. So we only really have solid numbers for heterosexuality and homosexuality. So let's look at those. Most people are heterosexual. However, homosexuality presents itself differentially in men and women. So what we see is that while rates of heterosexuality are hard to distinguish between men and women, when it comes to homosexuality, men are typically expressed at about 3 to 4%. With women, it's about 1 to 2%. Now, the reason for this, there are many hypothesized reasons. I think the most interesting reason why there is a gender difference regarding sexual orientation isn't that sexual orientation is necessarily on, say, a male gene, because if it was on a male gene, then women wouldn't have homosexuality at all. So the reason why they believe that this may be different is because men tend to have a greater sensation of rigidity in their definitions, whereas women tend to accept more flexible definitions. As such, the hypothesis here is that once men have sex with men, they call themselves a homosexual, because at that point, that has crossed the line from heterosexual behavior, and they don't feel comfortable in the in-between, so they call themselves homosexual. Women, on the other hand, tend to view sexuality as more fluid. In other words, they're not willing to commit necessarily to one definition of their sexual orientation. And so the expectation here is that while 1 to 2% of women will solidly classify themselves as homosexual, another portion of those women will classify themselves as bisexual. And as a result of this, we see lower rates of defined homosexuality in women than in men, whereas the behavior may still be at roughly 3 to 4% for both men and women. So the idea here is that men, they commit once they decide that they are going to engage in male sexual behavior with another man, then the idea there is that they're gay. Women are more likely to be fluid and comfortable with being attracted to both genders, and so we see that. And this is supported by preliminary studies which have found that women represent the bisexuality factor more than men. That is, that women engage in bisexual behavior at higher rates than men. Now, if 96+% of the population is identifying as heterosexual, then clearly bisexuals and homosexuals are in the minority. And everybody knows that being in the minority is difficult. You struggle with identity, and you struggle with persecution, and nobody wants to be in the minority. So I want to emphasize that. Nobody chooses to be gay. It's something that is largely predetermined by genetics, although there are some environmental factors that take place within the womb. But I want to be clear that it's not something that anybody chooses. So let's look at the origin here. We know that there are biological factors, and we know this because we can look at the outcome of those biological factors. We see that the brain regions operate differentially in homosexual and heterosexual people. For instance, Men that are homosexual have brain structures more similar to females than to men. In addition, there are the internal factor that we consider in the womb, the primary environmental factor, is actually hormone exposure in the womb. So if there is an imbalance in the hormones that the child is exposed to prenatally, then that's going to open up that genetic code that gives it access to being homosexual. So origins of homosexuality are genetic in nature. There are some environmental components which are the result of prenatal factors. So once a baby is born, its sexuality is set. It's not going to change. One of the other important things that I would like to stress is that homosexual parents are no worse than heterosexual parents at all. Kids benefit from having two parents. The gender of those parents are irrelevant. This is a new field of study. It's motivated politically, obviously, because there are a lot of questions being raised about gay rights. And so while the jury is still technically out, all of the evidence currently suggests that homosexual parents make just as suitable parents as heterosexual parents, and in many cases may actually be better on average than heterosexual parents because they make the conscious choice to adopt or get their own insemination, right? They make the conscious decision to have a child because they couldn't accidentally have one. Straight people, on the other hand, have children accidentally all the time. There are a lot of heterosexual unplanned pregnancies, but no homosexual child, or like, not homosexual child, but no child given to or born of homosexual parents was not a decision. So that's one reason why some evidence suggests that homosexual parents may actually be better in some regards. Another thing that really supports the argument that homosexuality is largely genetic or at least prenatally environmentally determined is the result of animal studies that we've done. Animals have, in almost every single species, and in fact every species that it's been looked for, has been exhibited. Same-sex partners are in most species worldwide. For example, we have these two penguins right here. They are both male, and they love each other, and they treat each other as if they were mates. So homosexuality exists all over the world. So that argument that it's not natural is bullshit. It is natural, and it exists worldwide. There's more evidence, though, evidence that comes directly from humans. So we see that homosexuality does tend to run in families. So if you have a gay parent, right, many homosexual individuals feel that they have to live a heterosexual lifestyle, and so they do have offspring. And so we see that many of these homosexual parents have homosexual children. So it does run in families. And it's not necessarily always parent to child. There's, you can have an uncle and still be more likely, and things of that nature too. Twin studies have also provided a lot of evidence to this idea, basically by looking at identical and fraternal twins, and then also looking at siblings and comparing the rates of homosexuality concordance among them, right? And what I mean by homosexuality concordance is, are the children born and do they have the same sexual orientation? And so we see that homosexuality is more common in identical twins than it is in fraternal twins. And then the evidence that we have from outside of our species is quite compelling from fruit flies, which is that we've actually manipulated the genetic code of fruit flies to have females act like males during courtship. We've done the opposite as well and had males that act like females. So just by manipulating the genetic code and finding the right areas, we are able to get these behaviors, these homosexual behaviors, to exist in different species. So there's a lot of support for the argument that homosexuality is due to genetic reasons. There's also some prenatal hormones, and these are the ones that basically unlock the genes and make them be expressed. So the prenatal hormones operate during critical periods of fetal development. So if a female hormone is exposed to a male or a female fetus, it will result in attraction to males. So if you are a pregnant mother and you have a son that has a genetic predisposition towards homosexuality, that means that they have the genetic code that's possible to be unlocked to become homosexual. And then female hormones are introduced into the prenatal environment of the fetus, then it will become, more than likely, a homosexual male or a male that is attracted to males. We see this again in other animals as well. We see that testosterone exposure to a fetus, a female fetus, results in that female sheep showing homosexual behavior. So, there's, again, a lot of evidence to suggest that all of the components of sexuality are determined prior to birth and not afterwards. So what does sexual motivation have to do with the rest of motivation? Well, it all comes down to the need to belong. Of course, our body wants to spread its DNA far and wide. It's always going to want to do that because our body is gross and it likes spraying stuff. But more than that, sexuality provides an outlet for emotional connection. And that gives us the sensation of belongingness. So sexual activity not only feels good because it's a stimulation of nerve endings, but it also feels good emotionally. There's an influx of hormones that make you feel really good and happy, and they build bonds between other people. So these bonds are very important for helping us feel connected as a society. So why do we have these bonds then? What do they do evolutionarily? Well, they help to make our needs operate better. So think about it this way. If you have a feeling of belongingness, which is right here in the middle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where you feel like you belong. Well, not only is that going to satisfy that need, but it's going to make satisfaction of all of your other needs easier. That's why this level of needs is so interesting and important. Because when you belong in a loving environment, then they will help you to satisfy your physiological needs. They will be altruistic and provide you with something they might need as well, but provide it to you because you need it more. They may also help you engage in safety behaviors, like making sure that your shelter is secured in the event of a storm, or they may work together to make sure that you have adequate protection in a fight, things like that. So, sexual motivation is tied to the feeling of community and belongingness with other people, and these social bonds are vital to our survival. Part of the reason why humans are so successful, evolutionarily speaking, is because our social bonds have given us boosts regarding our survival. We have added protection from predators, especially for the young. Think about if you had a situation where you were living with just your mother and all her children in the forest. No other humans around, you're just traveling around with your single parent unit. How is she going to protect all of her young? It's very difficult to do so. However, when you're in a community, you might have some people that are actively raising children and others that are not, and they can all work together to prepare anything that's going to save them from any predators. In addition, they work together to procure food and to help you produce more offspring. So social bonds are vital to our survival, and they're part of why our species has been so successful. So that's all there is to motivation and sexual motivation. The next lecture, we're going to talk a lot about social psychology. We're going to talk about social thinking and different social behaviors. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Feel free to ask me any questions, and we'll see you next time.